Hey everybody, as we start our study of India, we're first off take a little look at some Indian traditions, a little Indian geography, kind of start us off here. Just as a heads up, we do not meet on Tuesday next week, so we're due Monday. Please have them ready for our block class so we can go through all these different materials that we're looking at about India. So first off, let's talk about India a little bit and what India is. India is a subcontinent. So right here is India. You see right here borders to China, border to Pakistan over here, and it's a subcontinent. So according to the idea of continental drift, it is still technically moving. Okay, so India is slowly pushing this way towards China and making the Himalayan mountains right here. The Himalayas are the tallest mountains in the world. They are technically still growing because India is pushing into the Asian continental plate. Yeah, so Himalayan mountains, including Mount Everest up here, is still growing, getting bigger. They kind of give us this little border here with China. They also really impact the weather in India as well. We'll get to that in a second. The two big areas around India we have to know about are the two big river valleys. The Indus River Valley here, which is where our group explained the Indus River Valley started. That civilization began. We'll talk about them, just touch on them a little bit in class. We also have the Ganges River Valley. It runs over here, right along the northern part of India, and that's where a lot of people in India actually live, is around the Ganges River Valley. The Ganges River is a very, very important river in India. It's actually considered a holy river for Hindus. And so you'll see Hindus go there and do ceremonies and bathe and those kind of things in the Ganges River. We'll explain why it's so important, all those things, later on. Around the Ganges River is something called the North Indian Plain. Essentially a area of flat land where most of the agriculture, farming, cities are located in India. And a good chunk of the Indian population lives up here in this North Indian Plain. And so we'll see big cities like Delhi and New Delhi, the capital, all the different cities that are right along here. We also have an area down here called the Deccan Plateau. It's kind of a triangle shaped almost. It's a raised up chunk of land. Kind of changes some of the weather on there because it's that raised up chunk of land. And so the weather is more of a deserty kind of a climate where you will see certain things being grown versus other areas. On each side of something called the Ghats. The Ghats are these little mountain ranges that kind of border that Deccan Plateau. We also have a very unique climate here in India called the monsoon. The monsoon basically means you have seasonal winds that blow at different times of the year. So during one chunk of the year, the winds blow towards India. The other chunk of the year, the winds blow away from India. And so it's one thing that's really important for travel, especially back in the day. If you have a boat with a sail on it, if you want to travel to India, you have to time your trip out right so you can sail with those winds towards India. And if you want to go away from India, you kind of arrange your trip to go away from India. And this is big, especially in trade with Africa. The other thing that these winds do is create a rainy season and a dry season. And so what they do is that when the winds are blowing this way, you have a lot of moisture coming off the ocean and create a rainy season where it rains almost every day. We're talking it could rain a lot in India, especially in the southern part down here. And so you actually do have some rainforests that kind of take on down here as well. Not like rainforest, but like more of a agriculture area because of that. And so it rains a lot. Kind of like in the movie Forrest Gump, where it's like, and then one day it started raining, same kind of thing here. On the flip side, in the other part of the year, you have a dry season. So wind's blowing this way, stop at the Himalayas, mountain ranges over here, and it's a dry season for India where it may not rain much at all for a few days. Okay, food-wise, what kind of things are growing in India? In the northern part, it's all about grain, especially wheat and barley. In the southern parts of the river valleys, it's rice. And actually, rice is a huge part of Indian diets, along with wheat and barley, bread, those kind of things. In the southern parts too, I have some grain, but more vegetables, cotton for cloth, especially at one point. A lot of the cotton going to Britain actually came through India. You also have spices that go into a lot of Indian foods, pepper, ginger, cinnamon, those kind of things. The biggest thing with India we find is that there's a problem with agriculture there. It's really hard to break up the tough soil. And it didn't happen until iron plows were made. You can break up kind of the jungly kind of areas. And here's an example of an ancient Indian plow. And the funny thing about this iron plow is that early on there would not have been much iron in India at all. There wouldn't have been much iron at all there. So somebody had to come through that technology to get the iron, or at least get the iron out of the ground that was there to make the iron plows. It's something to think about. The big question comes down to who are Indians, where they come from. They're the language spoken in India is an Indo-European language, so it actually is related to language in Europe. And we think there's a group of people called the Aryans who came across the Hindu Kush Mountains that are in Pakistan over here into India around 2000 BCE. Probably came right through the Indus River Valley. Now, the language that they spoke that we found has common elements with Latin and Greek. Certain words are very, very similar. We think, the theory is, maybe they mixed with the Indus Valley settlers who were there, or the descendants of the Indus Valley people, and formed a brand new culture in what is now India. That's just one of the theories that we have as to what happened. Honestly, we really don't know, and a lot of historians, anthropologists, archaeologists have tried to figure this out for a long, long time. We do know about these peoples, what they spoke and wrote. Around 1000 BCE, we have early examples of a language called Sanskrit. Sanskrit is kind of the ancient language for India. It's used for religious purposes mostly. Not so much on a daily basis anymore, but definitely for religious purposes it's used. The really cool part about Sanskrit is that it has some common words between Latin and Greek. Words like mother, father, horse, those kind of things are very, very similar in Latin and Greek to Sanskrit. And we actually have books and poems written in the Sanskrit language that we can read. The most famous of those are called the Vedas. The Vedas is this big collection of sermons or religious chants that form some of the foundations for the Hindu religion. And so it's just all these scrolls for these sermons and stuff, the most famous of which being called the Rig Veda. And so they really form the basis of the Hindu religion. Also, we have another poem called the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is an epic poem, very, very long poem all about war. It's like 90,000 lines long. It's one of the oldest poems in the entire world. And it has a lot of really important ideas in it that help with Hinduism as well. The most famous part of that poem by far is called the Bhagavad Gita. It's essentially a sermon given by a god on the eve of a great battle, and it shows how India breaks down their society. And it's a very, very important idea that way in terms of how India's society looks. A lot of it comes from this Bhagavad Gita and these early, early writings. Now, the social class in India, there's 4 varnas or levels. Now we call this idea the caste system. The caste system is the British name for it. It's a little different in the Hindi language, but there's 4 levels that were in the caste social class system. So we have the Brahmins on top. They were the priests. The Kshatriyas, they're kind of these warriors and kings, those kind of things. The Vaishyas, who were the business community, and very lastly, you had the Shudras, who were basically like farmers, those kind of things, servants, workers, that kind of stuff. The very, very bottom of the Dalit, also known as the Untouchables. They do all the lower order work. We're talking like cleaning toilets, cleaning sewers, those kind of things. The thing about this is that it's very, very rigid. Okay, you are born into your class, and the class tells you what kind of job you can have. It also tells you who you can marry and what rights you have. The thing is, there's very, very little social mobility here. Okay, what you think, what group you belong to. You'd be born into that group, meaning what your parents do. You'd be born into that group, and you'd stay there, and that would be it. So my dad did metal work, still does. I would probably be a Shudra. Okay, but I think being academic today, I couldn't become a Brahmin like an academic. So those kind of things change that way. Over time, the idea of jati or caste forms, and it's this really, really very strict idea. And it's very, very hard to move in your caste. Most of the time, men cannot. Women can marry up or down, but men can only marry down. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look that way in terms of social class, the caste system in India, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later on. Also, gender roles. A lot of times, families are very, very big here. You may have 3 different generations, so grandparents, parents, and kids living under one roof. And it's very much a patriarchal society. Very male ruled. All the best jobs go to males. All the roles in the house go to males. Those kind of things. For upper class males, going back in ancient India, you'd have 12 years of study, 12 years of school basically, and then marriage. The other thing we look at is they perform arranged marriages and the idea of dowry. And so we're going to get into kind of where it comes into a little bit here. Arranged marriages are set by parents. So imagine your parents telling you who you're going to marry. So a lot of times it was done for business kind of deals, those kind of things, or for family to make sure the family name, caste moved on. The idea of dowry was that when a man and woman got married, the wife's family put up money for the marriage. Now the dowry was originally supposed to be almost like an insurance fund for the wife. In case that husband dies or gets an accident, that kind of thing, it was going to be kind of like an insurance policy for the wife, that she would have some money to live on in case a husband died. But unfortunately, sometimes they're becoming more of a thing where it's kind of like almost like buying off a wife kind of thing instead. I will talk more about the idea of arranged marriage and dowry and class. The last thing I want to touch on here in general is the practice of sati. And this kind of shows the idea of patriarchal society in this country, in ancient civilization at least, where the wife was supposed to throw herself on her husband's funeral pyre. So when the husband died, they would burn the body, and the wife was supposed to throw herself on the fire. Not necessarily practiced so much anymore, but it's kind of one of those ideas that come out there. Last one I just want to talk about and lead us into our next video are the religions in India. So one big religion is called Hinduism, which is about 75% of India is Hinduism, whereas polytheistic. They follow a lot of rituals. They believe in reincarnation. We'll talk about that in class, and the origins of this religion are in the Vedas. The other religion that starts there isn't necessarily as popular anymore, but it's called Buddhism, where Buddhism follows the teachings of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who created a path to inner peace to try and stop reincarnating. And it says weekend here, but we'll actually learn more about these next week in class. So make sure these notes are done for Monday so we can take a look at them. Thanks a lot for your work today, guys, and I'll see you guys later.